What's going on, guys? Ben from JK Gear and Gadgets, and welcome back to the 5th episode of the JK 1-ton swap video series. In our last episode, we worked on our rear 14-bolt axle, welded the swap truss kit on, and it turned out awesome. It's time to focus on the front Dana 60 swap truss kit. I'm going to go ahead and say, if this is your first time watching one of these episodes, I'd recommend going back, starting with episode 1. I talk about what axles you're going to want to find for this swap, and you see the progression of how we got to this point. So go back, check those out before we actually start this. Now, like I already said, this video, we are going to be doing our front swap truss kit. So we're going to check out what kit I went with, do some up-close shots of how you need to prep the axle prior to welding it on, and it's going to be a long but fun video. So sit back, hopefully enjoy the video. Let's do it. All right, let's dive right on in. So in the last video, we went with the Barnes4wd rear swap truss kit, and as you saw, it went together really smooth. So of course, we went their front swap truss kit as well. Have it all laid out here. Of course, it doesn't come like this. It's all wrapped up, but I got it all kind of, for the most part, out here to show you guys. Best thing about this is $3.99, pretty low price compared to some of the other options, and the big thing I really like about it is, just like the rear, it incorporates a full truss across the axle. It's going to give us a lot of strength and make it really easy to line up all these brackets. So comes with the truss, little side pieces for the truss, and all the brackets you're going to need for the JK. Upper control arm mounts, bushings for those, coil spring pads, track bar bracket. We have our shock and control arm mounts, pretty much everything we're going to need. And Barnes also includes a frame side track bar bracket, which is awesome. A lot of kits don't come with this, and that's something we are going to need once we put the axles under the Jeep. Since the Dana 60 is offset more to the driver's side, the factory track bar bracket's like right about here, and it hits the differential unless you're running a crazy amount of lift, which I wouldn't recommend. So they included the frame side track bar bracket, and we are going to weld this on right onto the frame once these axles are ready to be put under the Jeep. So that's awesome that they included that with this price point. $3.99, definitely pretty cool. And just like the rear, it's gonna be really easy to line up all these brackets in the perfect location. Let's take a look at the axle. In the second episode, I did a lot of prep work showing you guys how to tear down these axles. Sadly, with the front, I've had this for a long time, and back in the day before, I tried to YouTube everything I did, I had started tearing down this axle. Now, this axle, if you find it at the junkyard, has huge radius mounts, and I'll include a picture of that now. As you can tell, that is a lot of metal on this axle. It takes a lot of work to get it to this point. Check out the second episode. But Barnes actually includes step-by-step exactly what you need to cut off. The easiest way to do that is really not an easy way. It's use time, a grinder, sawzall, bandsaw, plasma cutter if you have one, or a torch. Now, if you do use a plasma cutter or a torch, be very careful not to overheat this cast too much when you're cutting the brackets off. Take it slow, let it cool. You don't want anything to crack on this. Now, the goal for this axle is, of course, to get the passenger side tube completely smooth. On the driver's side, we want to have this nice and smooth right here on the diff. As you can tell, I still do have a little lip. I don't think that'll be a clearance issue, but of course, once it's time to actually get this truss on, we'll have to test fit it, and we might have to grind down some more spots as needed. The back here, we got that smooth. Knocked a bracket over. Get this nice and smooth along here, all the way down on the bottom, and you do have to cut off 2 inches of this cast from the axle tube. Easiest way to do that is with a bandsaw or sawzall. You can even use a grinder with a cutoff wheel or a cutoff disc, but really make sure that you don't go and cut into the axle tube. If you do, it's no big deal. You can just weld right along there and it'll be plenty strong. Now, what I did, I just used the bandsaw and went nice and even all the way around and then cut horizontal lines, and you can kind of see that right there. Just nick the surface. You make those horizontal lines and hit it off with the hammer. There's some other videos on YouTube showing how to do that. So if you're really worried about that step, it's not bad. Check out the videos and just get the axle prepped. It's going to take a lot of time, but it's a very important part of this swap. So now that our axle is good to go, we are going to start assembling this truss. I'm going to go ahead and put all these brackets away. We don't need those yet. Put them back in the box they came with. All we're going to keep out here is the top truss piece and the 2 side supports. Our first step is going to be to tack our truss in place. We have this main top truss piece. We're going to flip it over on its side, And we're gonna grab this one that has the logo on it. This is like the truss riser, another main structural part of the truss. It has keyed slots that go right into the truss to make it easy to line up. We're gonna put these 3 in place and very gently tack this in place. We don't want to burn it in all the way because we might have to make some up and down adjustments once we get it on the axle. So we're going to tack this in place and do the same for the backside piece. With those 3 little tacks, we can still bend this if we need to. Don't go heavy on the tacks, just keep them nice and light. Now we're gonna do the same thing for this bottom piece. We're now gonna start welding on our coil spring pads and all the goodness over there. Our first step is going to put this bottom spring pad. As you can tell, it's a little crescent shaped moon, and you can see easily how it keys in there. It's kind of tight going in, but we're going to push it in so the bigger piece sits down flush with the bottom of the truss. It keys in there really well so you can't mess it up. This top piece over here is going to be flush with the top of the truss. We're going to flip it over and weld it on the bottom side. I'm just going to put a few tack welds for now, but you don't want to weld on the top because that is where our coil spring is going to sit in. So let's tack weld it on the bottom on both sides so it doesn't move. Now that we have our spring base tacked in, I did a little more than a tack. I did about a 1/2 inch weld on this side and over here. Be careful that you don't heat it up too much and pull this lower section up. You know, whenever you weld something, it wants to pull together. So tack it, then make a little, a couple more welds over on these 2 points. Later on, we'll flip it over and weld it fully in place. But we have our coil spring center and this tabs with these 2 tabs right into the truss. We're going to weld this all the way along on the inside, making sure it's nice and flush. Don't want to weld on the outside because that's where our spring is going to go. So let's weld the inside of this up. Now that we have the inside of our coil bucket welded in, we have the coil top right here. We're going to tab it in place. And we don't want it to fall in there like that. Sorry, this metal's hot, so I'm trying not to touch it. Just like this. We're gonna set it like here, tack it up, and weld all the way around it, and then down this bottom side. And that's done. We're gonna do this exact same stuff to the other side. We have both coil pads welded in. Those are done. One thing I forgot to mention, before you weld this coil pad on top, go ahead and spray the inside of this with our Steal-It. Because now that this is welded together, there's no way to get to the inside. You don't want to leave it bare metal. On the first side I forgot to do that. Complete brain fart. I've been in the zone, trying to make the video. But on the second side, before I welded the top piece in, I sprayed it with Steal-It just because, guys, once you weld this up, it's bare metal. You don't want any water getting in there once we drill and tap our hole here for our bump stop. There's moisture in there. We don't want this to rust from the inside out. So definitely use Steal-It on stuff like that before we actually weld it and enclose it. What I'd recommend is get your grinder after, and any weld spatter that you have, go ahead and grind it off the top because that's where our bump stops are going to hit. We want that to be nice and smooth. Same with down here and on the edges where our coil springs are going to go. If you do have any spatter, go ahead and either hit it off with a wire wheel, your grinder, really whatever. And I really kind of tried to make this this top nice and flush where some of my welds went over. But those turned out good, and it's really nice seeing this on the axle now. So we'll come back out tomorrow and knock out our next steps, which are our upper control arm mounts. We are back, and it is time to focus on the upper control arm mounts on the axle truss. As you can tell, there's 3 pieces here, and it goes together really easily. This middle base piece sits right in the middle, and the top piece keys right into our middle center support, as well as keying into the truss. We're gonna do the same thing with this side. pop it right in place, and it sits beautifully. Now they include a DOM sleeve. This is going to be for our upper control arm bushing. We're going to go ahead and slide that in place in there. That's going to be the last thing we weld together. We're going to make sure it's perfectly centered on both sides and weld it all the way around. But for now, as we have this in place, we're going to tack it on each corner of the axle as well as each piece individually. Tack it in, weld it in place, and then come up here and weld our DOM sleeve in place. Let's do it. Oh man. Yeah, I can go ahead and tell the welds brought this mount out a bunch. See that gap on the inside there? We're gonna have to close that up. And that's what happens when you only tack something on the outside. Like I said, the heat wants to, bring the weld in. So I'm gonna grab my clamp and definitely make sure that this is nice and tight once we make these welds. So let's weld it up. Do one little section, make sure it looks good, and then burn the rest in. Man, I'm getting weld junk on my GoPro lens. Good thing they're easily replaceable. Yeah, I'm starting to burn my new fancy GoPro lens. Let's move this back a little bit. You guys know what a weld looks like. Now, you want to put this sleeve in there, make sure it's nice and center, tack it 2 times on the inside, and we are going to weld a seam all the way around. It's pretty thin metal, so turn down the settings on your wire. I did a little practice on this side and actually kind of burnt through a little bit of the lip, but our rubber bushings will go in there, no issue. So turn down the heat on your welder. You don't really have to, this is just to pretty much hold it in place. There's not too much side load, especially since it's bolted from both sides. So we're gonna have to try to put this up vertical and make a nice weld all the way around. Try to do a nice continuous weld instead of making, a quarter here, quarter there, and it just kind of looks ugly. So we're gonna make one continuous weld, not too hot, but enough to hold this in place. So that's done. We're gonna flip it over, do the same on the other side. All right, so we got the passenger upper control arm mount welded in. Now, I started mocking up the driver side. It's gonna be pretty much the same thing. We key it in the slots, weld it, and weld our bushing in. But one thing I noticed, there's 2 possible ways to mount it, and I can't tell from the instructions which way it needs to go. So I contacted Barnes. They said their design guy is gonna get back with me in the morning to verify which way's which. But just looking at it now, how it sits now looks like the bushing is further back. If we flip it around this way and line it in the key, let's see right there, it looks a lot more in line with that other mount. You really want to make sure these are in line in case you do decide to do the swap with upper control arms, adjustable upper control arms on a JK. You want both the upper arms to be set the same length. If for some reason this is moved back, your driver's side would have to be shorter and the other one would be longer in order to get equal pinion or caster angle and position your axle. That would just make it horrible. So I think I'm gonna tack it up this way with the bigger curve angling in and the longer curve facing back. So I think this is the right way. Just looking at it, if we're putting it right here, it looks more in line. I'm gonna confirm that with Barnes. So I'm just gonna tack this in place from what I think looks correct. And hopefully they'll update their instructions. And tomorrow, once he gets back to me, I'll update the video. But I'm gonna go ahead and tack this in place. Little tack weld there, tack welded the bushing in place, and I actually did a little weld on the inside there because I'm pretty sure this is the location it's supposed to be at. But before fully welding it in place, I want to verify through Barnes. They said they're going to call me in the morning and let me know. But our next step after fully welding this up would be to tack weld our truss in place to the axle. We're gonna have to do a few things on angling for our pinion angle and caster angle before we actually weld this down. However, before we weld this down, you know I'm going to say it, we're going to hit the underside with Steel-It. Your guys have probably been, how much Steel-It have you went through now? This is still the first can. I can tell it's getting a little empty, but so far it has painted the axles after we took the brackets off and grinded it flush. It has done a majority of this rear truss, minus the bridge up here where we're going to weld to the cast. And it's still kicking. So this stuff goes a long way and it works really well. It's time to get this truss tacked down on the axle. Now, to do that, we are going to use an angle finder right here on the differential mounting surface. I took the 2 bolts out for the diff cover, and we want to get this as level as possible. So right now I'm sitting at 89.6. I can move it a little bit to get it right at 90. We're at 89.9. Perfect. So our pinion angle is exactly 0 right now. The diff mounting surface and the pinion angle correlate with one another, and we can check that by putting it right here on the yoke. And yet we're reading 89.7. So we'll throw it back here just to verify and make sure that we stay right at 90. Let's see, 89.6 now. Any little bit of movement is going to throw it off. Now, we're going to throw another angle finder up here on the top of the truss. We want our truss to be set back, angled back, about 7 degrees. So let's move it right. That's 7. I'm going to put it right on the side between 6 and 7. The reason we want to set this back at 6 degrees at a 0 pinion angle is so we can have a mix between caster and pinion angle. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. I want to go ahead and get this tacked up so I can kind of show you guys what happens when we increase our pinion angle, what happens to our caster, and what happens to our truss. But right now, we are right between 6 and 7 degrees on the truss and still at 90 on our differential mounting surface. So I'm gonna have to let this go. Let's go ahead and tack it up real quick. We are still looking good. So we got this front side tacked in. Should be enough to hold this in place. We're gonna flip it over and tack the back. So we just got the truss tacked into place, how it's gonna sit. We'll probably weld it in later, but there's still some other stuff we have to do. And there's some stuff I wanna talk to you about and we can look at and discuss right now. This is gonna be a pretty long portion, but it's pretty important to understand the basics of this axle. Now, we're gonna talk about a few terms. Caster, pinion angle, level truss top. That's pretty much all you need to know. You've probably heard those terms before, but if you're unfamiliar with what they are, caster is the angle through the ball joints, looking at the side, forward or back. It's what keeps your vehicle wanting to drive straight and have the steering wheel return back to center after a turn. That's caster. Pinion angle, you're going to want a positive pinion angle pointing the yoke at your transfer case. Now, caster is extremely important for daily driving. Driving on the highway, you really don't want a flighty steering. On normal axles, pinion angle is extremely important because you don't want driveline vibrations. On this Ford Super Duty axle, it has lockout hubs. One of the benefits of a 1-ton axle. This is what goes right up here on the outside underneath all your lug nuts. What this does is if you unlock this, it separates the drivetrain from the wheels, meaning if both hubs are unlocked, nothing inside this differential is turning. Also meaning our drive shaft will not be spinning. So on the highway, we are able to get away with running a lower pinion angle because it's not spinning. So that's an awesome thing about having lockouts. Now, this axle has 10 degrees of separation, meaning we can have a 6 caster and a positive 4-degree pinion angle. The difference between those two is 10. Now on the factory JK axles and a lot of other axles, the differential is about 6, meaning if you ran a 6-degree negative caster, you'd be at a 0-degree pinion angle, which is horrible. Now, let's see what it's set up for right now. We're gonna go ahead and measure our caster, put this right on the ball joint. Right now we are at a 7-degree caster, which means our pinion angle is at positive 3. If we check the truss, we are right around 3 degrees, which is cool. Negative 3 degrees. Why is that cool? Why don't we want to completely level? Well, in case we want to take out a little bit of our caster and add a little more pinion angle to make our Jeep happy, this truss will become more level. However, it is kind of smart to have a truss that's turned and clocked back a little bit for a few reasons. Once we jump to 40s or bigger tires, we're going to want to stretch this axle forward some on the Jeep by adjusting our control arms out or having longer long arms. Now, when we do that, the factory top of the coil bucket sits right above the normal coil bucket spot. If we move this axle forward an inch, that coil spring is going to want to bow inward. Now, if this was flat, it would have a lot of weird bowing going on. Being that we have a -3 degrees or -2 degrees, it's going to sit, the coil spring's going to go forward, but sit flush and not really have any weird bowing issues. So that is awesome to have, you know, a setback -2 or -3 degrees, still having awesome caster and awesome pinion angle. And one other thing I want to talk about real quick is that the Super Duty axles have ball joint inserts, which is awesome. This little insert right here, mine is 0, meaning that this is just an insert, there's no correction. Now you can get caster correction inserts and camber correction inserts, and some that offer both, which is awesome because if for some reason we need to increase our caster more because we're maxed out on our pinion angle, we can go online and buy new inserts that are going to give us additional caster and some that are able to correct camber issues if our ball joints are worn or any other axle issues. So having these inserts is awesome. They're cheap, and it's a cool feature that a lot of other axles don't have, including the factory Dana 44. So we're tacked in, we are good to go. Our next steps are going to be welding on our shock brackets and our control arm tabs. After that, sway bar tabs and track bar. So still a lot more to go, and we still have to weld all this together, but it's starting to take shape. It's really cool, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the pinion angle caster since we just tack welded this truss on. It's something you want to verify that your setup is going to be happy with before we fully weld it in place. If you're running a crazy amount of lift, you're going to want your pinion angle better. You're going to have to adjust your truss a little bit. But for my setup, which is pretty much standard for a lot of you guys, 4.5 inch lift, 3.5 inch lift, anywhere around there, 6 degrees caster, 4 degree pinion angle, and your truss turned back a little bit is going to be golden. And I got to this point by pretty much following their instructions. Level diff cover face, rotate this back to 7 degrees, and now we're here. So let's move on to the next step. That's enough talking. Our next step is going to be to weld on our shock mount brackets. As you can tell, there's a major difference in the two. One has 2 prongs and the other one has 1.5. The one that's funky looking is going to go over here on the driver's side, just because there is a difference between the cast tubing and the actual steel. It's going to tab right in place with this key. Put it in there, and once that little slot is parallel with the truss, that's where we're going to keep it. I'm going to weld to this area which is cast, and in a future video, not this one, the next one probably after this, I'm going to do a full video explaining how to weld to cast steel. There is a special process. It's a long process and a lot of talking in this video, so we'll include that in the next one. But we'll go ahead and tack this up. Might not weld it all the way because we still have to fit our lower control arm down here. So let's tack this in place. Now that we have this just tacked in very lightly, we would do the same thing on the other side. However, I want to show you how our lower control arm mounts are going to go in, and I really want to wait to weld this in until I know that we don't have to do any movement around for our lower control arms. So our lower control arm brackets have a nice little tab in there, and they are cut out for our axle. Once again, the driver's side has a funky cutout. They're not even, just because of the difference in the tubing. So what we're going to do here is put this slot in the slot on our shock bracket, and it almost looks like we're going to have to trim a little bit off this C where this weld is in order to get this to line up perfectly, because it's not wanting to go in right now how it sits. Let's see. Curious to see. If we move our shock bracket over just a hair, I gotta grind that down real quick. Let's see what happens when we move our shock bracket over a little bit. A slight angle won't hurt anything. Let's position these on at once and see if we can get a good outcome without too much trimming. Let's see, right there. That is almost perfect. I really like how that looks. So I'm gonna tack it in place just like this. Now we'll check again with our lower control arm mount, and I like that. I really do. There's a slight gap on our shock bracket from the axle tube, but I'm honestly not too worried about that. Once we start welding it, it'll suck it in, and this way we don't have to grind too much off our inner C. That's a pretty critical weld right there. I don't want to grind away too much. But just like that, I am happy. We want to make sure that we chose the right shock or control arm mount, and it should angle in towards the pinion since this axle is wider. But that right there, that looks good. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and weld this shock bracket in place. You'll see me make the weld over here, and you'll see me break out a torch and preheat this metal, make the weld, and then slowly cool it down. That's what I'm talking about by welding to this cast. We'll go more in depth in that later, but I want to go ahead and get this welded on, and we will talk about that procedure lately. I just wanted to mention it. That's what you'll see me doing when I'm heating up this area. Shock bracket is welded on. We have a weld along the axle tube side and over here on the cast. What I'm doing with that is I preheated it with MAP gas, and now every couple minutes I'm going by and blasting it again just to let it slow coolie. Or coolie slow. Good, wow, I'm going crazy in here. Yeah, we're gonna let it slow. Wow, I'm literally going insane. We are gonna let it cool slowly so it doesn't crack the weld. Now that's in place, we are gonna weld in our control arm mount. Woohoo! Tab's really nice in there. I had to grind a little cutout right here from where I welded under here. That was hitting. So I ground that down and it fits nicely in place right there. As you can tell, the control arm bracket is angling in towards the pinion, which is what we want. So let's go ahead and weld this into place. I just finished up welding the passenger side shock bracket and control arm mount, and as you can tell, went in super smoothly. Just once again, on this side, it's not a big of a deal because we have a lot more room. We're not running into the cast and we're not running into the diff. So we weld all the way along our shock bracket as well as the inside, and tab our control arm mount to the shock bracket and weld it to the axle tube. Once again, inside and out. So that's done, went together really smoothly. And over on the driver's side, the GoPro ran out of storage, so I really couldn't keep talking, and I didn't want to dive into this too much. Like I said, welding to cast, I'm going to talk about it in a completely different video where we are going to weld the truss to our differentials, and on this side as well. That's going to be, it's a video within itself, so I'm not going to dive in there, but we're going to let this cool for a while. Our next step after shocks and track bar, shocks and control arm, just gave it away, is our track bar bracket. This guy is going to go pop in together just like so. It has the key, and just like the rear axle, I'm going to use a track bar to put it in there, make sure the mounting width is correct, and this guy is going to sit right up here against the truss right there, and we are going to weld it to the axle tubes and the portions where it contacts the truss. This front track bar bracket, like I said, is going to go exactly like we did the rear in the last video. We're going to mock this up with a track bar or a track bar end inside it. Make sure everything's tabbed together. Tack it up, double check, and then weld it up. Nice. This little guy right here is the last piece of the puzzle to weld onto the axle. All we have to do with this is our sway bar mount tab. What we're gonna do is position it right about ½ inch away from the inner C here and keep it in line with this spot weld right here on the axle. We're gonna position it right there, make it in line, and weld it in just like that. And we are done. All we have to do is go back, weld our truss risers to the truss top. Don't have to do it all the way across. Do it in little seam welds across the axle, and then go down here and weld these tabs to the axle. That's going to be the part where we're going to go really slow, let it cool, and we don't want to warp the axle. So that is going to be a very long and drawn out process. Taking it slow, alternating sides of the axle, and that's about it, guys. So let's go ahead, tack this on, make sure it is nice and level, not crooked, and burn it in. Sweet! Everything is added to the axle. All we have to do is weld the truss together. Well, our swap truss kit is done. We have one really small thing left to do, and that is install our upper control arm mount bushings. So I already went ahead and did it on the passenger side, as you can tell over there. And yes, I did get a hold of Barnes, and they told me that the correct orientation for this upper control arm mount is to have that big radius facing forward with the letters out, like I had talked about and like I tacked in. It's pretty obvious, but I could see somebody, you know, in the zone, welding everything up, missing that step. So that's why I kind of talked about that for a little bit. Let's go ahead, tap this in. And just like that, we are done. Have all the mounts welded in. Everything's on there, except for the section where we have to weld to the cast on the front axle and the rear. Like I was talking about earlier, I'm thinking about making a video showing you guys how to weld the cast. If that's something you really do want to see, let me know. Kind of on the edge of making that video, just because it's such a small amount of people that might want to watch it. But like always, I'm trying to do this video series step by step. So let me know if that's something you're interested in, and that's going to be what I'll be tackling probably today, tonight, or the next day. But this is looking really good. As you can tell, I went ahead and put a real light layer of steelite on it. I still have to wait for the weather to warm up and dry out because it is nasty out there and cold. But I went ahead and put a real thin layer here in my garage. So later on, once it warms up, we'll go back and really paint the entire axle right before it's ready to go into the Jeep. But overall, the kit was really easy to install. You do have to know how to weld. You don't have to be professional. Grab a welder, borrow a buddy, start practicing, get your welds good. And this is a very simple project to tackle. Now, we still have a long way to go. Just because the brackets are on the axle does not mean it's ready to go under the Jeep. I'm not really sure what video we'll be doing next. I might start working on the gears and lockers, something I have not purchased yet. That's going to be a very big purchase of the build. That's probably one of the most expensive parts, but it's time to start getting rolling on that. We will be focusing on steering. There's just a ton of other stuff to do on this axle, but very happy with how this came out. Like I said, $399 for this front swap kit, and Barnes does offer free shipping over $50, which is awesome. So if you're in the process of starting to purchase all this stuff, one of the really cool things about getting all this stuff from Barnes is that's free shipping, and you can order a bunch of stuff at once. You can get your front swap kit, your rear swap kit, your diff cover, and as you'll see in the later videos, we can order the steering too. So there's just, it's almost a one-stop shop other than the axles and gears and all that stuff. But it came together really nice. Thanks for watching, guys. And like always, if you have any questions about a certain step I did, or just any questions in general, feel free to let me know or ask away. I'll do my best to answer them. And for all those other people that were on my last video, like, oh, this guy isn't a pro. No, I'm not a pro, clearly. But this is a project that you don't have to be a pro on. I'm just a guy that enjoys Jeeps. I like working on projects. And I'm not out here putting professional videos together, but a lot of people are curious about this swap. They want to see what goes into it. So I figured this would be a great series to show you guys and anybody who's wondering what all kind of work goes into this 1-ton swap for the JK. So thanks for watching, guys. Like always, give this video a big old thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more videos. We're gonna keep putting out 1-ton videos and a lot of other videos in between. We have a little sneak peek at something back there behind the Barbie Jeep, but that's for another video. So stay tuned. Peace.